Henrietta Lacks, an ordinary African-American woman, unknowingly became one of the most significant figures in modern medicine. In 1951, her cancer cells were taken without consent, leading to groundbreaking scientific advancements. Known as HeLa cells, they are immortal and have revolutionized cell research. But who was Henrietta Lacks, and what is the story behind her miraculous cells? Discover the woman whose legacy changed science forever. Henrietta Lacks was born on August 1, 1920, in Roanoke, Virginia, to Eliza and John Randall Pleasant. Tragically, her mother passed away during childbirth when she was giving birth to her 10th child. Henrietta was just 4 years old. In 1924, her father moved the family to Clover, Virginia, where he split his 10 children among relatives due to his inability to care for them all. Henrietta was raised by her grandfather, Tommy Lacks, alongside her cousin, David Day Lacks. While Day left school in the 4th grade, Henrietta continued her education until the 6th grade. On April 10, 1941, 20-year-old Henrietta Lacks married her cousin, Day Lacks. Following the advice of their cousins, the couple moved to Turner Station in Maryland to escape the hardships of tobacco farming. Day secured a job at Bethlehem's Steel Sparrows Point, and they started their family. Henrietta and Day had 5 children: Lawrence, Lucille, David Jr., Deborah, and Joseph. Around 1950, Henrietta mentioned to her cousins a strange feeling, like a knot inside her, but she didn't seek medical help. In January of 1951, Henrietta felt a persistent knot inside her, along with unusual vaginal bleeding and a lump on her cervix. This led her to seek medical attention. Henrietta eventually decided to visit the Johns Hopkins Hospital in Baltimore, Maryland, when she felt she had no other options left. It was the only hospital in her area that would treat African American patients, although she received care in a segregated ward designed for Black patients. In 1951, doctors at Johns Hopkins diagnosed Henrietta with cervical cancer. Despite the gravity of her condition, Henrietta chose to keep her diagnosis private. She only confided in her husband, telling him she needed to visit the doctor for medicine. Determined to handle the situation on her own, she didn't disclose her illness to her family, sparing them from worry. This decision reflected her strength and resilience. Henrietta Lacks underwent extensive testing at the Johns Hopkins Hospital as she prepared for her initial cancer treatment. In line with the medical practices of the time, her first treatment involved surgeon Lawrence Wharton Jr. implanting radium, a radioactive metal, into her cervix. Radium, known for its cell-killing properties, was encased in small pouches called Brack plaques and sewn into her cervix. While radium can cause mutations that lead to cancer, it is also used to destroy cancer cells. During this procedure, while Lacks was sedated on the operating table, Wharton took 2 tissue samples, one from her tumor and another from her healthy cervical tissue. These samples were placed in a glass dish and handed over to a resident, who then delivered them to George Otto Gay, the head of tissue culture research at the Johns Hopkins Hospital. Gay was leading pioneering work in cell culture, searching for a line of human cells that could survive and multiply indefinitely outside the body. During the 1950s, patients at the Johns Hopkins Hospital, including Henrietta Lacks, often had their cells collected for research without their knowledge. Dr. George Gay, a prominent researcher, was on a mission to develop an immortal human cell line, cells that could endlessly regenerate in the laboratory. Gay handed Lacks tissue samples to his research assistant Mary Kubasek, with the task of culturing both her tumor cells and healthy cervical cells. Cell culture involves growing tissues or cells outside of the original body, and Kubasek was tasked with attempting this with Lacks's cells. Although skeptical, as all previous cell samples had failed to proliferate continuously, Kubasek proceeded nevertheless. She took Lacks's tumor sample, placed it in a culture medium, and labeled it HeLa, a name derived from the first two letters of Henrietta's first and last names. During this era, it was routine for physicians to use patients' samples from public wards without informing the patients or obtaining their consent. The only consent that Henrietta provided was an operation permit, which allowed the hospital to perform any necessary procedures and administer anesthetics for her care. Henrietta Lacks's cells, later known as HeLa cells, exhibited an unprecedented ability to proliferate. Unlike other cells that perished quickly, HeLa cells grew continuously, multiplying 20 times faster than her normal cells. Just weeks after her initial radium treatment, while Henrietta resumed her daily life working in the tobacco fields, her cells were making history in the lab. The HeLa cell line not only survived, but thrived, marking the first time human cells were successfully cultured and maintained outside the body. Dr. George Gay, the scientist behind the discovery, realized the groundbreaking potential for these cells. He informed his colleagues that they might have the first immortal human cell line on their hands, and began distributing vials of HeLa cells to other researchers. During this period, Henrietta's family remained unaware of her cancer diagnosis. As her treatment progressed and her tumor shrank, the next phase involved X-ray therapy. With her husband working nights and unable to accompany her, Henrietta confided in two cousins, asking for their support during her treatment sessions. Tragically, by September of 1951, the cancer had aggressively spread throughout her body. Henrietta Lacks passed away on October 4, 1951, officially due to terminal uremia. This condition occurs when the kidneys fail to filter blood properly, causing toxic substances to accumulate in the bloodstream. Normally, the kidneys and liver work together to eliminate these toxins. Despite her significant contribution to science, there was no obituary for Henrietta Lacks. However, the laboratory at Johns Hopkins Hospital, where her cells had been taken, was informed of her death. Dr. George Gay, who had been studying her cells, saw an opportunity to gather more samples from her organs to further his research. However, obtaining these samples legally required the family's consent for an autopsy. The doctors approached Henrietta's husband, explaining that further medical tests could provide valuable health information for their children. This appeal to the potential benefits for their family persuaded him to grant permission for the autopsy. Today, the cells collected from Henrietta Lacks in 1951 have become some of the most widely used in biomedical research. Her cells, known as HeLa cells, have been instrumental in countless scientific breakthroughs. Researchers have utilized HeLa cells to understand the effects of zero gravity on human cells in space, explore the intricacies of the human genome, and advance studies across various diseases and vaccine development. However, the identity of the donor behind these revolutionary cells remained largely unknown to the public until the 1970s. Henrietta Lacks's cells were taken without her knowledge or consent during treatment for cervical cancer at Johns Hopkins Hospital. Although Dr. George Gay, the scientist who first cultured HeLa cells, claimed he intended to keep her name private to protect her identity, this secrecy enabled research institutions and pharmaceutical companies to profit from her cells without acknowledging her or her family's contributions. Henrietta Lacks's story underscores significant ethical concerns in medical research, particularly regarding consent and compensation. Her family was never informed about the use of her cells, and received no financial benefits, despite the immense commercial value generated by HeLa cells. The widespread use of her cells without consent has sparked critical discussions and reforms in the ethics of medical research. Today, her legacy is a driving force behind the stringent requirements for documented patient consent for research samples, ensuring that no one else will unknowingly contribute to scientific advancement without recognition.